Let's solve this particular question called Lopten Industries. Right. So, what do we need to do? In this particular question, it's a 50 marker. We need to calculate the suggested KPI. So, calculation. That's a very good marks right there, 11 marks. So, this kind of question won't appear nowadays, but yeah, it was worth a lot back in those days. Right, so calculation is there, and then we need to do best analysis to identify issues and effectiveness of the suggested KPI. So how can best analysis identify the issues and effectiveness of the suggested KPI, right, in addressing these issues, right? So we identify issues with best analysis, and then how effectiveness. So okay, there is two part to it. So first is you identify the issues with best, and then we identify the effectiveness of the suggested KPI in addressing this multiple issues, right? And how the suggested KPI fit with the CSF. Okay, how does it contribute to CSF, and then how does it lead to, as per rational planning model, how does it lead to objectives, and then further on your goals, and then further on your strategy, right? And then your vision, no mission, and then your vision, right? So the extent to which suggested KPI could be used in planning rather than controlling. So whether the suggested KPI, always in your answer you can always talk about whether those KPI can be used for planning or controlling purposes. Okay, next thing is the proposed marketing strategies, right? So let's discuss about calculations of KPI first of all, but before that let's read. Right, let's read. Lopten Industry is what? It's one of the largest listed, right, manufacturer in the world. So it has what? Economies of scale. And to earn those listed points, you could talk about share price impact. Alright. To earn those commercial argument marks as well. So it's listed, right? It's largest. So it has a market share. So it manufactures what? Washing machines, tumble dryers, and dishwashers. Three products. It has recently expanded into B-land, which is a developing country where economies or where incomes have risen to a point where demand for goods among the growing. So demand is increasing, right? So it's a growing market, let's just say that. So whenever we are talking about growing market, right, so in that situation the market share is going to be very crucial, right, among the growing middle class population. So it's growing among them. So it's a developing country, it's always the case, right? The market is growing and your market share should grow relatively. That's the target, right? That's the target. So we could use some BCG, you could do some BCG analysis in that, right? Now whenever you are doing portfolio analysis, we could do that. Lopten believes in economies of scale, okay, of large manufacturing sites with dispersed selling branches in markets in which it operates. Therefore, it entered the B-land market by setting up local sales force and supporting them with the local campaign, national campaign, right? National marketing campaign. Currently, it is only selling two products in Beeline. Both are washing machines. One is basic product called Cheerful with functions which are comparable with the existing competitors' output, and premium product called Posh, which has functions and features similar to product in other developed countries. So that's the premium brand, premium product, right? It has functions, higher functions, higher, right? Both products are manufactured and imported from its regional manufacturing hub, which is in neighboring country of Kayland. So it's a MNC. Let's just say, of course, it's a MNC, but it's importing it. Importing it. Of course, that's going to have some impact on it. Right? It's importing it. Of course, there will be currency risks, exchange rate risks. I mean, forex risks will be there. Exchange rate risks. There could be hedging that could be done to manage it. Right? There could be other issues such as whenever they talk about these things, so they talk about all this local competition and how government is encouraging and all, right? So I'm pretty sure we'll see that in the competitive environment. So this is what we are doing. We are doing the industry analysis in this particular market of Beeland, right? What's the competitive environment? It's changing very rapidly, right? So the competition is intense. It's getting intense, right? The washing machine market used to be dominated by two local manufacturers who make simple, cheap, and reliable machines. Right? It used to be. There are two other international manufacturers. So, two other manufacturers, right? Two other manufacturers. How much market share do they hold? Market share do they hold, right? And one of these have already opened a factory in Beeland. Okay, so is their cost small? What's their cost structure, right? If they have opened up a local factory, that means they might don't need or they might not need to pay. Opened a new factory, that means what else? It could be getting grants, it could be getting benefit of what? Of no customs, right? Is producing machines similar to Cheerful to directly compete with local producers. So it's basically targeting Cheerful, right? So this new factory is producing Cheerful. The government of Beeland has supported this new entrance with grants. Okay, that will again put up a pressure of cost control for our organization, right? And it is keen to encourage inward investment by foreign companies. Okay, encourage inward investment. So that's a political issue as well. How can best basically help identify such issues? So best has identified this issue, and how the KPI, right? KPI such as what? Some cost measure can help us track, right, whether we are becoming or what's our operating situation, right? What's our cost structure? So if our KPI is aligned or it measures some of the cost structure, if we know, right, if we just know that there is a change in competitors' cost, right? Of course, that data might not be available, but if we have some sort of KPIs to measure it, right? To measure it, or even a market share is also a relevant indicator of that, but it's a lagging indicator, of course, because you see what happens is the other competitors' cost could have already come down. We are still at a higher cost, right? So they would have already, by the time we would have seen the market share figures, they would have already captured that market, right? The market. So that's a leading indicator, not a that's not a lag that's a lagging indicator. It's not a leading indicator, right? So we could track something as the percentage increase in customs duty, right? That could be one significant cost. It could be, right? Not a significant cost, but we could track the manufacturing cost in KLand and manufacturing cost within the country. That will need external data. So since this company, we don't know whether the international manufacturer is and listed company or not, right? Whether the data are available or not. That's very important, right? Whenever we are doing benchmarking, right? External data. Next thing, let's move on. The government is trying to encourage inward investment, right? They want employment, right? They want to build up their expertise and they want to have employment. So the more international competitors is now considering entering B-land with highly specified machines. So many are trying to enter the market with Lopten's POS brand. Okay, so they are trying to bring about the premium product inside the market, right? Many are considering, okay, the competition is even getting more intense because it's not only a basic product. Of course, the people will demand basic products at the beginning, then once they get addicted to it, they start asking for the premium ones, right? Similar to your phones, right? Before it used to be they launch $10,000 phone, then they get you hooked up, and then after that they start pushing you to buy the mid ranges, right? Then slowly you start going for the premium ranges. It's the similar strategy, right? Similar strategy. So mission statement, CSF and KPI. Let's read it. So what's the CSF? Mission statement is to be successful manufacturer of its type of product in the world. So they want to be a world leader or a successful manufacturer, right? The board has set following critical CSFs, right? Critical success factor is to obtain a market presence. So market share is very important. So we need to have that thing in our KPI, right? To maximize profit with acceptable risk. Okay, so that means they don't want to take in much risky projects, right? So their discounting or their cost of capital will be uh, what will be basically high if they perceive any risk, right? So it will generally be lower because they are only willing to accept less risky projects, right? To maintain the brand image for Lopten for above average quality products. So they want their brand image to be of a premium one. Okay, they want to be viewed as a premium brand, right? So the board is considering using the following KPIs for each product. Okay, fine, they could do it. They want total profit. Okay, maximize profit. Okay, so it's an absolute figure they are targeting. So they want average sales per price per unit. Okay, contribution per unit. They want market share, margin of safety, ROS. They want total quality cost. They want consumer awards won, right? They want all these KPIs. We just need to calculate it. They just want the calculation. We have 11 marks for that. Of course, we want to get this kind of question nowadays. That's the sad part, right? The performance measurement system, right? How are these? So we have our performance measures. So what's our performance measurement system, right? The board has asked you as a consultant. So our role is as a consultant over here. Okay, so whenever we are writing our heading, we write what? To the board, right? Right now I think the board is asking us, right? The board is asking us. So to the board, and then from consultant, right? Date today or whatever the date is, right? Then next thing is what? Next thing is subject. right? So performance management issues, right? That could be the subject. Give them the introduction. So we need to assess. The verb is assess current performance measurement system and wants you to prepare a report covering a different areas. Okay. Firstly, they want you to calculate the KPI suggested by them for the assessment of performance. So for the assessment of performance. Second, we need to identify issues in the external environment and then evaluate the effectiveness of suggested KPI in addressing these issues, right? Right. So there is two parts to it. Then there is the third part where you should take each CSF in turn and evaluate how KPIs fit into the CSF, right? How do they address the CSF? Fourth, you should assess the extent to which the suggested KPI can be used for planning and control purposes, right? Next thing, the data is given in Appendix 1 on Beeland's operation information for most recent financial year has been collated for your use with these four tasks, right? Next thing, marketing strategies. Finally, the board is considering two new marketing strategies going forward. What's the plan A? So two new marketing strategies. First plan is what? So continue operations as it's present, allowing for 4% growth in volumes, right? In both, for both the product. So 4% growth, right? Plan B is to dramatically reduce spending on cheerful. So for cheerful, it will be 0 and to focus on marketing on posts only. So this is more likely to contribute to one of its CSF of brand building as premium brand building as a premium brand, right? So this is expected to lead to an anticipated growth in volume of 15%. So that would increase the volume of 15%. So volume would be 15% higher, right? And there would be flat sales. Okay, the implications will be that fine. The target operating profit for the Beeland operation in 2 years is set at 135 million. So for the final task, the board has asked you to evaluate whether the two proposed marketing strategies result in Beeland hitting its operating profit target. So whether the operating profit target would be hit or it would be achieved by which plan? By which plan? Right. So now let's calculate all these KPIs first of all. So let's open our model answer side by side as well. Right. So there is a lot of calculations right over here. Not JSK. Where did it go? Lopten Industries, that's it. So as I have said before, so make sure the answer is set discussing KPIs in part C, not CSF. Okay. Number part C, of course suggested KPI fit into CSF. So ensure you complete basic calculations correctly and accurately. Also be prepared you argue your case, in particular justifying each indicator under consideration. Okay, first thing is calculation, right? So board of the Lopten, so that's who we are addressing them. The accountant, the date, subject is basically KPI for Lopten in Beeland. Right, we could say that as well. The report basically first of all calculates the KPI suggested by the board, then it evaluates the effectiveness in addressing external environment issues, It covers the ability of CSF, or their ability to cover CSFs chosen for BLAN, and how they address the key function of senior management to plan and control. Finally, the report evaluates the two suggested marketing strategies. Right. So first thing first, let's see what was the thing that they want. Product profit for each product. Right. Let's see. Let's see profit for each product. Profit for each product. So profit for each product, right? So what's the revenue? What's the revenue? Where is our revenue? It's right over here, 448. Right, that's for the total. Right, it's for the million. So how many units are there? So it's 1.12, and the other one is 0.44 units. Revenue is that much. Right, what's the variable cost? Variable costs are material, labor, distribution, and quality. Right, it's until over here. So it's distribution, quality, all those things are right there. Right. So next thing we need to do is we need to compute the labor cost. So 60 times your 1.12 times your volume. Okay, so similarly we do that for everything. That will give us a contribution of 162. Right, then we subtract our fixed costs. Of course, that's not guided by volumes, so we can just subtract until over there, until the marketing cost. Right, so 18, 16, 6 and 80, we get a total fixed cost of what? 120. When you subtract, okay, that was just 162 for contribution only. That was our contribution, right? So total fixed cost is 120. So when you subtract from that, we get a profit of 42. Right, 42. Next indicator. Okay, 42 for that, and we got our profit figure. Right, we got our profit figure. What was that? So 42. All right, and what's the average price per unit? Average price per unit, it's going to be it's going to be the revenue divided by your units. Right, so that's our thing, average price. So we have our contribution per unit that we have already done. Right, so what was that? Contribution per unit was 162. No, we have to use that's for the whole thing. 162 divided by 1.12, that's 144.6. right, so that's 145. For market share, we can just calculate the total market size versus this 1.12 divide by your 9.33, so 12%. Right, and there was something about margin of safety. They had mentioned it in the question somewhere. I know I read it somewhere over here on the note. Right, so margin of safety is actual sales minus break-even sales unit divided by actual sales unit. So it's just the margin of safety. So how much can the prices go down by? Right, or how much can the units go down by? Even then we make a break even. We are breaking even. Right, so for that we need break even sales units. So break even sales unit is basically calculated based on your contribution. So how much contribution you are making for every fixed cost. Right, so contribution per unit for the total fixed cost. So it will be 120 divided by 162. You are already making more than enough. No, not 162. What was the contribution per unit? So it is 120 divided by 145, so 0.83, right? So that's the figure. So that's the break-even sales unit. So we need to do actual unit minus that divide by actual unit, right? So that can be computed easily. Similarly for ROCE, we have been given what capital employed is already been given. So all you need to do is profit by that, right? So profit by that 42 times 1.12 divide by right. So ROCE can be computed in that way as well. Right, where is the profit is 42. $12.88, that's it. All you need to do is that's this thing, right? We know the quality cost is what? Quality cost on variable quality cost is 20, and then the quality cost over here is 6, so that will make it 26. Okay, in million, we need that in million, right? We need that in million total quality cost, so not per unit but in million. So this is 6 right over here, and then we multiply 20 into 1.12, so that's 22 plus 6 is 28, right? So that is there. And then number of consumer awards, 1, right? Has won 1, and the other one is 4. So these are the KPIs. So next thing we need to do is issues in the external environment, right? The issues in the external environment can be identified as per PEST acronym, right? PEST acronym, right? It can be identified under it. And so the political environment is characterized by government action, which is basically they are giving what grants right over there where it is competitive environment, right? It's giving grants. So this is not Lopten's mode of operation, which is to manufacture outside. So none of the KPI directly address, right? Which could lead to increased profit available, right? So as I mentioned before as well, so none of the KPIs is addressing it, this issue, which can lead to increased profit available to develop the competitor's product, or government action against Lopten by increasing import tariffs, right? Remember, you could always talk about that, right? For economic environment is characterized by growth in the populace of B land becoming wealthier, right? So we could identify that. So there is no measure in the KPI which identifies this, right? So how much is the economy or people are growing wealthier? So there is no measure of competitor activity, although market share does provide some measure of relative strength of Lopten to its competitors, right? It provides some relative strength. It is notable that none of the measures the growth in their area, right? None of the KPIs they measure growth, like there is no profit growth or nothing else, right? Also the KPI do not reflect foreign exchange risks, remember. Yep. So and could counter in repatriating repatriating profits, so taking back your profits home, right? So there it does not have any indicator of that, right? Next thing is socio-cultural changes, which include demographic change or trends or changes in customer taste, right? So the increasing wealth mentioned earlier may be a factor in driving consumer taste towards more expensive POS products. This would justify the large potential growth indicated in marketing plan B, right? So that would justify. So there are several measures which bear on this area, but as noted above, it will require trend to be given, right? For example, inflation of average price per unit, right? So inflation of average price per unit and consequently improvement in profit and contribution indicators could provide such changes, right? Such demographical changes, technological changes, right? It can have impact in two ways. The first thing being the development of new feature for the product themselves will require continued product development at Lopten as a whole, right? Although this will be less relevant to the operations in B land, which may not have the market for cutting edge technology. So that's a skepticism right over there, right? Therefore, it is appropriate that this area is not covered by existing KPIs. Second, the new technology in manufacture could improve the contribution per unit as costs are cut down from manufacturing processes. For example, increased automation in production. The use of contribution to measure this impact is indirect as it is influenced by selling price. So a measure of manufacturing cost per unit would be better to capture the change, right? To capture that change. The indicator would be that, right? Even the contribution is basically not really a direct measure because that is influenced by sales price. The next thing is linking what KPI to CSF, right? How KPI fit to the CSF given. So CSF is all these things, right? The first CSF, so we could divide it to different headings, right? So first thing is dominant market presence, right? So this could be measured by market share, right? What else do we need to do? How the suggested KPI fit into CSFs, right? So CSF is basically a dominant market share. This is measured by market share and which can be seen in the POS as well, right? So it already has a market share of 33%, but so this could be said to be a major presence in order to judge whether this is a dominant presence or not. So you see, even in their CSF, it's not only a market presence, but it's a dominant one. They want to dominate the market. So that means right now they have a 33 market share. So that it does not mean that it's a dominant one because we don't have the market share breakdown as per competitor. Okay, so maybe what if someone else has a market for, like, let's say a market share of 50%, they are dominant, right? Not us. So in order to judge, we need information on competitors market share. So other KPIs, what could be an indicator of dominant market presence is basically average price per unit. ROCE, consumer awards, can be used in measuring market position, but again, if comparable data for the competition is supplied. In order to achieve dominant market position, Lopton might have to cut prices in order to drive up volumes, and the contribution per unit, which shows how far the selling price can be cut before breaking even, is reached. So it could do that, and contribution per unit could be a good measure for that as well. So it's a good thing that they have woven this thing clearly, right? The second thing is basically CSF. So second CSF is maximizing profit with the risk appetite of the business. So the absolute level of profit is given as KPI. So a trend analysis of this will indicate optimization. The trends in average price per unit and cost per unit, not a KPI, but indirectly indicated through the contribution, will show effectiveness of marketing and production activities in order to generate profit, right? How much are they contributing to profit? So production and marketing activities. So ROCE will provide, so maximization of profit, right? So ROCE will also provide an efficient use of capital indication, which we are using right now, right? Next thing we can measure is through margin of safety, right? So that could measure risk, right? Acceptable risk. So a margin of safety will give us how far sales would have to fall to result to a break-even profit, right? So that could provide us some indications of that. Third CSF is about maintaining the brand through quality, product quality, right? This could be, so the most direct of this could be the number of consumer awards, right, as they show impression being made on the consumer by the product. Next thing is total quality figure, right? That gives us idea on how much they are making on quality. There is no indication. You see, I wanted to talk about this and then I just saw this point right over here. So I wanted to talk about you're building a brand, right? You're building brand image. So you would want KPIs such as marketing spending, right? There is no KPI for that, right? So these are the things that we would need to keep in mind, okay? So having a structure of or heading based on all the CSFs, we could try and link that to KPI would be very helpful. Next requirement was planning and control at Lopten, right? So how can the suggested KPI be used for planning and controlling purposes? A lot of it, I think. A lot of it. Let's just see and dissect. So profit is mostly about controlling, right? So yep. So planning is carried out. Let's just talk about planning, control, and then the board level, right? Suggested KPI, how it can be used. Okay. So planning is carried out at Lopten from top down structure to the mission objectives and CSFs leading to KPI, right? The KPI which will be reflected in this activity are those which are forward looking. So in planning, it should be forward looking. The margin of safety addresses some of the risks of making a loss going forward, and a margin and the size of the margin will give the board comfort that they can afford to take strategic risk without risking the survival of Beeline's operation. Another indicator would be awards won. Okay, that also could be used in planning, right? Awards won. So that gives us the ability, or it shows, right? It shows that the company's ability to build volumes and margins in the future. The other are general financial health, which will provide capital base for future plans, right? Which will provide capital base for future plans. So the control measures actual results against plan, then takes necessary actions to correct activities back to the plan. So in order to be used in this way, the KPI calculated will need to be benchmarked to the benchmark comparators should be given, right? So most of the indicators used in this way, if benchmarks were provided, right, would be used. So at board level, much of the decision making, so we are writing a report to the board, right? So much of the decision making is planning, while at the operational level most of it is more about controlling. Therefore balance among suggested KPI is unusual towards control. You see how they have evaluated that point, right? It's a very high level analysis of the KPI. So that is what is demanded of us when we are writing the exam paper. So this issue should be addressed by including measures such as revenue, share market growth, which could establish trends for useful financial projections, right? Right. So there should be, right now it's very skewed, okay? The number of KPIs is very skewed towards control. So we need balance right over there. We need to make it normally distributed, right? Next thing, we need to talk about what the two proposed marketing strategies, right? So we need to do a bit of a calculations right over there. And in plan A, we are assuming that what will happen at present, we allow for 4% growth. So we continue operations as it is and allow for 4% growth in volumes of both cheerful and POS, right? Two new products, and then in 2 years time, okay, so we need to create for POS and cheerful, and then for plan A, and then for 2 years, right? So for 2 years, so most recent is 162, right? So given that, we need to increase that figure by 4%, right? So we could just do 162 times 1.04, right? That will give us 168 point something, right? So that's equivalent to that. So similarly for POS, it's also going to be same thing, 165 times 1.04, 172, right? So as per plan A, if we continue with the current marketing expenditure, whatever it is, right, we will be earning a profit of 87 right now, or we already have, and we will be earning 100 next year, or in year 1, in year 2 it will be 114, right? In the next plan, right, if we were to dramatically reduce marketing spend on cheerful to 0, okay, so first of all, what's our contribution right over there? It's 162, right? And 165, what's the fixed cost is 240, and 87, that's the recent, right? In year 1, what we will do, we will reduce, right? So we will reduce for cheerful, so that will be lead to what? Flat sales for cheerful. So sales is flat, that means the contribution will be same, right? And for 15% of the volume, so there would be a growth of what? So if we dramatically reduce marketing spend, right? So I know this formatting thing is not so well done or right over here, but still, right? If I were you, I would not use this particular format. It's not very clear from this, right? I would even subdivide those fixed costs and then remove those marketing spend from this cheerful thing, right? From the cheerful product. So Right now, anticipated volume is 15%. Okay, okay. So 165 times 1.15, so 190. All right, 190. So basically our marketing cost is going to be same thing. It's going to be same. So fixed cost is going to remain same. Okay, then our profit would be 112 and 141. So it seems like plan B is a good way to go forward, right? So if we continue with the current marketing strategy to maintain our product mix, then VLAN will fall short of the profit target. There was a profit target given as well. Where was it? 130 something. Where was it? Right over there, 135, right? So 135 target in 2 years, that will be met, right? So it would fall short, it would fall short by how much? 21 million. However, if Lofton adopts plan B, right? If it adopts plan B, the company can achieve its target in 2 years. The success depends on the achievement of high growth rate of 15%. The growth rate will depend on continued improvement in the general economy, right? So that is dependent on that, as this will create more wealth to generate demands for higher contribution POS products. It will also demand on the success of marketing spend on promoting POS, right? It will depend on the success of that, right? So we are not taking that 15% growth at its face value. We are being skeptic, right? We are using our skepticism right over here. So it would be wise to consider whether the increased marketing spend would be effective, as the current spend of 80 million may be saturating the market at present, right? So right now the market may not be that much big that you need so much marketing expenditure for a premium product like POS, right? Right. So additional spending might not generate proportional more sales, right? It might not be in the same proportion. So if your sales growth happens only by what, 12%, and then your marketing spend is increasing by 100%, right? Conclusion, right? So it's a very good commercial acumen marks that can be achieved from this point. Commercial acumen, because some people might argue, okay, what we are spending 100% more, but we are doing that for brand building as well, for brand building purposes, that will bring us benefit down the line, right? But that's not a commercial acumen related argument, because we need to see what is feasible or what works right now, right? So since the data can be measured right now, you have the revenue growth data as well, and then how much your marketing spend is growing by, right? So you can't know how much your brand building or how much of this marketing campaign that you just spent on will bring or will increase the brand value by, right? It will be very subjective. So it's more about commercial acumen as well whenever we are suggesting our argument. Next thing I wanted to look at was conclusions. So the current KPI, right? Conclusions. So let's see. The current KPI do not cover many of the external factors, right? And it has a weak link to the CSF, right? The balance of KPI is towards control, when the balance of the board work will be forward looking towards planning of the future, right? So it's skewed, as I have mentioned earlier. The revision of the KPI should be undertaken in order to address these concerns. The current marketing plan will fall short of target profit, and it should shift to emphasizing higher margin products which will achieve the profit, provided that the growth assumptions are realistic, right? Provided that the growth projections are realistic, right? We could even say some kind of simulations kind of thing that can be done, right? For scenario analysis can be done, we could even say that there is further scope for scenario analysis, or like we could mention that, right? So in the calculation part we are getting 11 marks, right? 1 marks, 2 marks for variable cost, and then everything else is 1 marks. For the best heading, why, right? So 2 marks for discussion of relevant issue in the scenario, and up to 2 marks for commenting on the relevance of KPI to the issue. Okay, so there were 4 headings, and then within that 4 headings you're getting 8 marks, let's say, and then for identifying each issue, and then up to 2 marks. Okay, number 3 is up to 4 marks for comment on each CSF. Okay, so it's 10 marks, so basically we had 3 of them, so 3.5, so of course maximum will be 4 marks. Okay, so that can be easily done, right? Many people, I'm pretty sure, would have answered that. And number 4, oh, that's for number 3, right? So number 4 was 1 mark per point made. So for planning and control, so people normally try to do, like, you could have different headings structure as like different KPIs, and then how that is inside planning, or whether it's towards control, right? So that could be there, and then they miss out on one thing, that they don't think that report is being prepared for the board, and then they miss out on like there should be a balance and all, like they don't mention that. But just by looking at this, I'm already guessing what kind of answers that the candidates would basically come up with. Okay, I'm already figuring out, so I'm just assuming it, of course. I'm pretty sure some might be far better than that, but you see, like it can't be. Let's see, we'll figure it out in the examiner's comments, right? So in calculations, so again in part contribution profit shortfall, right? So we are getting 1 marks just for mentioning the shortfall amount. For comments is basically up to 4 marks. Okay, up to 4 marks, because yeah, it's a 9 marks, right? It's a 9 marks question, so that's very important. Okay, let's look at the examiner's comments. So most candidates performed well. The main weakness in this area were in the basic profit calculations and the profit margin safety, right? So for such a basic set of calculations, it was disappointing that most candidates did not take the opportunity to score all 11 marks. A relatively common error which appeared here in part 5 of this question was the treatment of fixed cost as volume related. So future candidates should be aware that break-even and associated analysis is something that will be considered to be expert in time by the time they reach APM, right? So I think some of them made a mistake in break-even calculation as well, right? Break-even calculation as well. Next thing, part 2 is mostly about what? Most candidates identified number of issues in the external environment using PEST or SPL model, but were notably weaker in applications of it to the KPI suggested. Okay, so they were weaker, like they did not identify how effective the suggested KPI were in addressing those issues. Okay, it's very important to break down the question, the requirement. That's the problem with this paper itself, right? So it seems a little bit confusing kind of thing, the requirement for non-English speaking candidates, but that's how it is, right? So 2 issues become apparent in marking, right? Firstly, The majority of the candidates did not use the best model and so were only given some credit as the question was about application of this model, right? So they did not use the model, they just gave some credit for which was about application of the model, right? Secondly, many candidates discuss their own set of KPIs, ignoring the ones under consideration by the board. So they just discuss their own. That's wishful thinking, right? So second fault was particularly notable in the answer which offered list of new indicators with scant justifications for their relevance and their impact on the proposed KPI to be used by Lopten was particularly notable in the answer, okay, which offered list of new indicators, okay. That's a very bad practice, right? Very bad practice. So scant justification is not really a good thing. It's not really a good thing, right? And next thing is part 3. Part 3, how suggested KPIs fit into the CSF given. So the part was mostly well done, right? And as in part 2, candidates had a tendency to ignore suggested KPI and produce list of new KPIs to address the issues which were justified in context, not justified in context. There was a tendency to discuss problems with CSFs rather than the KPIs which was not suggested by question. Right, so for example, a suitable response to the concept of acceptable risk was to look at how it can be measured within the existing KPI rather than just comment the acceptable level of target level of acceptable risk was not clearly specified. Ooh, most people missed out on that, right? So the break-even thing was a risk associated KPI, right? It was already there, right? It was not about you coming up with a new suggestion, but it was about what? Look at the existing KPI and try and identify which basically addresses some of the risks or concerns or risk critical factor, right? Which addresses, which provides a little bit of idea about risks. That's all we had to do, right? Not come up with a new one. So in part 4, the extent to which the suggested KPI would be suitable for use in planning and control. So candidates more often drifted away from the question requirement, which was about assessment of the extent to which suggested KPI can be used for planning and controlling. The purpose of the question was to offer candidates the chance to show that they appreciated the difference in these activities. Okay, purpose was they appreciated the difference. Sadly, this question was poorly done with answers discussing control activities to the exclusion of planning. So candidates should not be afraid to answer, to say that they have poor coverage in existing systems, provided that the opinion is justified in their answer. You see, it should not be afraid to say they have a poor coverage. Many candidates seem to think incorrectly that setting and monitoring of target is a planning activity. Setting and monitoring is a planning activity. No. So the distinction were more that suitable KPI had to be forward looking and had to focus on external environment. Again, this part was insufficient focus on there was insufficient focus on the suggested KPI list. Remember, they talk about balance, so people did not answer that as well properly. I told you that's a common mistake, right? Because in the exam setting, it's clearly not so. It's very hard to think from a high level, right? Unless there has been a lot of practice gone into it. So number 5 was basically either done well or badly with little in between. So candidates addressed the fixed cost correctly, realized that the target profit was given as the profit in 2 years, thereby producing calculations for 2 plans. They tended to easily score above pass marks, right? So when they produced calculations for two plans, therefore there were two common and fundamental errors in calculations. Firstly noted above was the failure to recognize fixed cost in the estimation of future profits by taking previously calculated profit for product and multiplying it by 1 point something. One oh, they just did that, huh? They just did that. They just multiplied it by 1.042. Many candidates attempted to answer the question by doing only a calculation of profit in 1 year or else not doing any calculations working at all. So for candidates that cannot see how poor such answer is, we would suggest you imagine the response of your boss when you have requested a forecast for the next year profit. You come to the meeting with either a forecast of the first 6 months profit only, and or else a statement that look okay based on the fact that you made a profit last year. Such answers scored some marks for the discussions of the assumptions in this strategy, but did not tend to collect many marks. Okay, so they just scored some marks based on the assumptions in the strategy. Okay, very insightful, right? Very insightful. Very good question, I must say. Very good question, very insightful. And that's pretty much it for this video. Take care. Bye bye.